chuyến đi Việt Nam của dân Việt Loretta Sanchez. Và chúng tôi cái chương trình ngày hôm nay thì nó khá là mở rộng, có nghĩa là bà sẽ tường thuật về cái chuyến đi cũng như một số cái chi tiết mà chúng ta có thể chưa nghe được. Rồi sau đó thì là sẽ mở ra cho tất cả cái câu hỏi của tất cả quý vị, và sau đó thì chúng tôi sẽ show 3 cái video của cái buổi cái vấn đề xô xát ở ngay trước tư gia của đại sứ Nguoi thì có audio, có đầy đủ hết, thành ra chúng tôi sẽ làm cái đó chuyện ở trong. Bây giờ chúng tôi xin turn over này cho nữ dân biểu Loretta Sanchez, bà sẽ nói bằng tiếng Anh.
And I want to thank, in particular, the Vietnamese press here today for coming and really covering my recent trip to Vietnam. I really wish that, in fact, Vietnam was a free country and you could have all come with me to Vietnam. But as you know, I was there, I was allowed a visa only for 2 days. And somebody asked me the other day, why did you not tell the community you were going to Vietnam? And my answer was, I was so desperate to get a visa to finally go into Vietnam because we needed to go in and take a look at the conditions that I really didn't let people know. And I went in with a committee, with a group of people, Congress people, from the military committee in the Congress where I sit. And so the Vietnamese government believed that this was going to be a meeting of the military, members of the military committee to discuss with the government more military cooperation between our two militaries. However, I had told the chairman who was taking us in that I had other work to do in Vietnam, of course, that I wanted to try to meet with some of the dissidents. I apprised him, educated him about the situation with respect to human rights. And so I not only went in under the official trip, but also to work on some of the human rights issues. I arrived on Thursday last week. I had spoken to our ambassador, Michael Marin of the United States, and he had set a tea for 5 p.m. on Thursday in Hanoi at his residence with 5 wives of dissidents who are currently jailed, and with one mother of course, the young lady who has recently been jailed. And I began to receive notice about 2 in the afternoon that the women were being blocked from leaving their homes. Some were taken into local jails to be interrogated, to be detained. Roadblocks were set up so that people could not leave their homes or their streets. 2 of the women managed to make it through. Those 2 women, one of them was Dr. Pham Hung Sung's wife, Vu Tui Ha, and the other one was Bui Kim Nhang, who's the wife of Nguoi Viet. And they were able to, they came together on a motor scooter, and they were able to make it to the ambassador's home. They arrived at the same time that I happened to arrive, because we were to be there at 5 p.m. We were outside of the gates of the ambassador's home, and when about 15 men descended on us, half of them in Vietnamese soldier uniforms, the other half plainclothes people. They tried to separate us and sort of separate us apart. I stayed with one of the ladies. The other lady got separated. They started to scream at the women that they shouldn't be there. The women said, we're just here to have tea. My military attaché who was with me was monitoring the situation. We sent somebody into the ambassador's home. The ambassador came out. And the ambassador asked the men, these are my guests. They are going to have tea with me this afternoon. Please let them through. They would not let them through. He then asked, who has sent you? Whose orders are these to keep these women? He was getting nowhere. Meanwhile, and you can see in some cases in the video, because we had some video taken, that these men began to push and manhandle and pull the women to push them aside to get them away from the ambassador. The ambassador actually used his own body, if you will, to move the men from coming in on the women. I was standing next to one of the women the entire time, at one point holding her hand to hold her close to me. The men were trying to pull us apart. And finally, it became apparent they were threatening the women. They were starting to go after their motorcycle to take it away. And finally, the ambassador said to the women, it's obvious you need to go home, that we're not going to resolve this here. And so the women went home. We don't know how far they got. And we have not heard whether they made it home yet. Later that evening, I was able to speak by phone to one of the women who was supposed to be with us, who did not make it. And she said, that was Mrs. Nguoi Viet, who said that her house had been surrounded by the police the whole afternoon and the whole night. Even as we were speaking, she saw 3 uniformed policemen in front of her home just guarding that she would not come out. The next day, on Friday, of course that night the American ambassador sent message to the foreign minister about what had happened, and told him he was very angry about the situation. The next day, we were able to meet with the Vice President of the National Assembly. Madam Nguyen was also there, as she is the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the National Assembly. And I brought up the issue, and the ambassador who was with us also brought up the issue of what had happened and said it was totally unacceptable. At the same time, I asked if I could meet with, to go to the central jail of Hanoi to meet with Lee Kwok Kwan, one of the dissidents who had been recently jailed, who I feel a personal attachment to because I nominated him to the National Democratic Institute that he attended here in the United States. Once he returned from attending that at the beginning of March, almost immediately he was arrested. We don't know yet why. There have been no charges, but I'm assuming it's over his coming to America and attending this democratic institution, the one which I sponsored him to be. So I wanted to go and meet with him, go with his wife and meet with him in the jail. And when I made that request, Madam Nguyen said to me, "You know better than to ask to see these people." When we were, in the afternoon, when we were meeting with the minister, with the foreign minister, we brought up the issue again. Also, because we were at the government offices, I dropped by the park, the garden in front of the government offices to meet with the petitioners for land reform. As you know, one of the things that I did in the Congress to pass a resolution from the Congress asking for land reform, that if land reform would be done, that land should be returned, in particular to the religious institutions from which it has been taken. There are people, as you know, who have every day in Hanoi been petitioning for this land reform, and I wanted to meet with them. They were there the day before. We monitored it. On Thursday, they were there. On Friday, when I was at the government offices and I walked over to the park, they had all been taken away by the police. When I met with the the foreign minister, and I asked him why would something like yesterday happen, he said, "We have our own laws. Every country has its own laws. People who are in jail are there because they've broken the laws." I said to him, "But these women didn't break any law. They're just married to these people who you have jailed." And he had no answer for that. The land petitioners knew that I was trying to meet with them. So that later that afternoon on Friday, before I left the country, they attempted to go to the Hilton Hotel where I was staying to meet with me and to petition, to hand me some land petitions. They were stopped about 100 yards from the hotel. I could see them from my window, but I was not let out of the hotel, and they were not able to come to the hotel. I also was able to meet with Western Press to get the information out. We were able to get some pictures out, and today we brought, because we didn't know whether we were going to be able to bring out the video and the pictures in particular, but we were able to, we left with them and we have them, and as you know, we're distributing them into the main press and into the Vietnamese press. So that's my report. That's what happened in the less than 2 days that I was allowed into Vietnam.
Chúng tôi sẽ show cái video trên màn ảnh 3 cái video này. Chúng tôi thì hiện giờ đang sản xuất, cảm ơn Nhật báo Người Việt đang giúp chúng tôi sản xuất những cái CD đó cho tất cả quý vị. Thành ra cho tới cuối chương trình này thì chúng tôi sẽ phát ra những cái CD đó để quý vị có thể dùng cho tất cả các đài truyền hình cũng như là các báo chí. Thì cho chúng tôi có một số cái chưa bao giờ tôi làm chuyện này ở Nhật báo Người Việt, thành ra để
thế này, anh có tôi bây giờ vẫn không phải là cái người vớ vẩn gì cả. Tôi nói làm thảo này là cái người là không anh cộng đồng và người chúng tôi. I'm sorry, I'm a woman, but they let me like. I'm not a person to be treated like that.
Và bà đó là Vũ Thúy Hằng. Đó là ông Bắc, ông đại sứ, ông đã rất là concern về những cái hành động của chính phủ công an Việt Nam. Thành ra ông đã yêu cầu là bà có nên trở về nhà, tại vì nó không có an toàn nữa. Chúng tôi quay lại cái clip đầu tiên của bà Vũ Thúy Hằng nha.
Cái này, anh có thì tôi bây giờ vẫn không phải là cái người vớ vẩn gì cả. Tôi đã nói là cái này là cái người là của cái cộng đồng và người chúng tôi. I'm sorry, I'm a woman, but they let me like. I'm not a person to be treated like that.
Kính thưa quý vị, đó là 3 cái video mà người review sự của cái đoàn đã chụp thu được. Đèn lên lại đi, đèn. Dạ, xin bật đèn lên lại và chúng tôi sẽ có cái CD cho tất cả quý vị, có cả 3 cái video và tất cả những cái hình để chúng tôi xin lược qua một số cái hình để quý vị thấy. Thì một số cái tấm hình mà quý vị đã có báo chí đã cũng có đăng rồi. Bây giờ xin mở cho cái question để quý vị có thể hỏi bằng tiếng Anh hoặc tiếng Việt, chúng tôi sẽ thực hiện cái đó qua. Dạ, xin anh rồi.
Okay. Trước khi mà đặt câu hỏi á, before posing a question, thì I would like to bring a message to Loretta Sanchez. This message is from Woman Khánh. She's a wife of a lawyer, Nguoi Viet. Yesterday we have a chance to talk to her, and she said 2 things. She said first, she's sorry she received the invitation, but because police is surrounded, so she cannot come to see you. She's sorry about that. Next, she said she's in danger right now. She prayed Congresswoman to help her. That's the message I would like to carry to you today. And now here is the question. Recently, after this whole incident, Vietnam speaker of the speakerman Nguoi Viet, speakerman of State Department. He said you are not cooperate with Vietnam. You don't serve the purpose for the relation of Vietnam and USA. And also an article in Nhân Dân newspaper. The Nhân Dân article said Loretta Sanchez' real purpose is to be elected to governor of California state. What is your answer about this? Thank you.
Well, my answer to that is, first of all, human rights, as you know, are important, are something that we hold valuable in any country around the world. What has happened with Vietnam is pretty straightforward. First we gave up the embargo. Then we gave them a bilateral trade agreement. And in every step, this government of Vietnam has said that it will be better to its people, that it will be, that it will have freedom of the press, that it will have freedom of expression, that it will have a religious freedom. But at every step we have seen that they have not honored that. Now, in January, they received entrance into the World Trade Organization, it's the WTO. Now there is no bargaining chip to bring them to the table to say, make changes with respect to the way you treat your people. So since then, what we have seen is that they have clamped down on anybody who has had anything negative to say, who has wanted more freedoms, who has spoken up. The people who signed the petition in April 4th of last year, all of these people, not just the top dissidents, but further down in the whole issue of bringing up freedom of expression and freedom, religious freedom, had been jailed or had to leave the country. So it's been incredibly oppressive. And now, having gone into, and by the way, the ambassador there, Michael Marin, he agrees that this has happened. In fact, and while there has been trade and economic progress, and there are more choices for people in Vietnam with respect to that, the fact of the matter is it's gotten worse on the human rights issues. And in fact, the ambassador has recently written an opinion, an op-ed piece that has been published in several newspapers in just the last week, talking about the whole issue of human rights and the oppression by this Vietnamese government against its people. So this is an important issue. It is one we need to continue to fight. Why? My first trip into Vietnam, I was able to meet with Dr. Daniel Nguoi, and he said to me, in order for those inside of Vietnam to continue to fight for their rights, we need to know that the outside world is fighting with us. He says it's incredibly dangerous, it takes a lot of courage, and it gives us a lot of courage when we see someone like Loretta Sanchez helping us from the outside. And if you want to see courage, the courage of that woman, because you didn't see what they were doing to the other woman. There were two. One, they were able to break apart. You know, the courage that it took to stand up to these men, as she did, was incredible bravery. And so when people ask me, why are you doing this? This is not for politics. This is too important. This is beyond politics. This is not about whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're a Mexican American or whether you're a Vietnamese American in Orange County. This is about basic human rights. And these dissidents need our support. We need to continue to shine a light. And what happened on that day made Condoleezza Rice just yesterday stand up and say, there is a problem here in Vietnam and we need to address it. She sent her Assistant Secretary of State for Asia and the Pacific Islands to go and talk to the Venerable Thich Quang Do the other day. And because of this, they were forced to allow a visit to that religious leader, which hadn't happened before. So I think it makes a difference I think it makes a difference in Vietnam. I think it makes a difference when I'm working on human rights for women in Iran. I think it makes a difference when I go to Cuba and I tell them that they need to open up their religious affiliations in Cuba. I think it's important when I go to Mexico and I tell the president of Mexico that, you know, there needs to be better education opportunities and that the state is not doing enough for a basic right of people to be literate. I think it's important when I tell the President of the United States that what he has done in Guantanamo Bay is incorrect with respect to basic human rights. Even if we believe that the people we are holding are terrorists, they still have basic human rights that we as a nation must uphold not only in our own country, but must work for all people in the world. We are incredibly blessed in this country, incredibly blessed, that we're not sitting out there trying to figure out how we're going to feed ourselves today, and that we have time to actually look at how other countries treat their citizens. And if God has given us that time, if He has blessed us to have that opportunity, then to honor Him, because He created us in His image, to honor Him, we must continue to work.
Vietnam News run media. Vietnam News has recently linked your visit as part of a terrorist threat. Can you respond to that?
Oh gosh, let's see. If wanting to work with people who want freedom of expression, a very basic need of all citizens, if wanting to work with people who work so that whatever your religious belief is, you have the opportunity to practice that. If wanting to have people have a voice, I just don't understand why they would label that as a terrorist organization. The organizations that I work with to talk to the dissidents, to work with people in Vietnam, are human rights organizations around the world. And I don't believe that they're terrorist organizations. I think when you look at the stories coming out from the government, that it's all propaganda. I mean, they believe that Human Rights Watch, for example, is a terrorist organization. I mean, they're not even in the real world. They can't face reality. Why? Because when you shine the light of reality on their practices, they don't look very good. Anything else?
Dạ thưa quý vị, nếu mà có câu hỏi bằng tiếng Việt thì chúng tôi cũng có thể dịch lại cái câu hỏi của quý vị.
Nếu không có ai hỏi thì tôi hỏi nữa được không?
Dạ không.
Nếu không có ai hỏi thì tôi sẽ xin hỏi nữa.
Dạ xin mời.
Well, because nobody asked us, I have another question. Nothing to do with human rights, nothing to do with Vietnam stuff. My question is, what is regarding about military cooperation between Vietnam and US, and you are in that committee? What do you think all about this? Thank you.
I think it's, as you know, we are monitoring the situation from a military aspect with respect to the Vietnamese government and that country. As you know, we have made some strides in the last couple of years where we have seen some of our ships now go into Vietnamese territory. We have two Vietnamese soldiers who are about to graduate from some of our war colleges here in the United States. These are very preliminary steps with respect to military cooperation at this point. I think it's a long way off to assume that we will have strong military cooperation at this point. We are just testing the waters. But I believe that with the State Department in particular now seeing the situation with respect to human rights, that Vietnam is going to have to change that before we see real military cooperation between the two countries. They're just bigger issues. The issue of how you treat your people is central to the issue of why would we train their military if they may use their military against their own people. So I think it's very, the window of cooperation with respect to the military is about this big right now. Vietnam would want it to be this wide. To get to be this wide, I think they're going to have to do a lot more with respect to the rights of their own citizens. At least I would hope so. And that's what I would advocate to Condoleezza Rice, Secretary of State, and to the President, and to whoever the next President is. I don't see a lot more happening on the military front at this point.
Tôi từ Liên Sài Gòn TV, tôi xin được hỏi bằng tiếng Việt Nam, tại vì khán thính giả của chúng tôi sẽ nghe chúng tôi tiếng Việt Nam nhờ anh tạ Phú Lê xin chịu ứng dụng. Trong những cái lời nói phát biểu trên báo chí gần đây, trong vài ngày gần đây, chúng tôi được biết rằng và có nói rằng chính phủ Hoa Kỳ vì quyền lợi kinh tế mà đã bỏ rơi những cái nhân quyền, những cái dân quyền, những cái tự do tôn giáo, tự do dân chủ của Việt Nam. Cái chuyện đó người Việt Nam chúng tôi đã thấy hết cái chuyện này, nhưng mà tiếng nói của chúng tôi nó không có đủ mạnh để cho chính phủ Hoa Kỳ suy nghĩ lại, và bà đã nhìn thấy điều đó. Bây giờ câu hỏi thứ nhất của chúng tôi là chính phủ Hoa Kỳ thực sự vì quyền lợi kinh tế mà bỏ rơi những cái con người cần dân quyền, cần nhân quyền, cần tự do tôn giáo. Thí dụ Hoa Kỳ đã giúp đỡ cho Việt Nam vào WTO, Hoa Kỳ đã lấy tên Việt Nam ra khỏi danh sách tự do tôn giáo. Thế thì bà nghĩ thế nào và bà có thể làm gì để mà chính phủ Hoa Kỳ bớt đi quyền lợi kinh tế của mình và phục vụ cái nhân quyền, cái tự do tôn giáo của Việt Nam? Xin cảm ơn.
Well, first of all, let me agree with many of the things that you just said. I think because of the economic pressures, our country has been more willing to work with Vietnam and not see the progression in human rights. Also remember that there are many countries in the world and many problems in the world. And so, Vietnam is just a small little piece of that. So it always requires somebody to be pointing to Vietnam and to be bringing up what is happening in Vietnam. I am incredibly privileged by representing this community to be the one in Congress to continue to say, this is the problem, look at what's happening. Incredibly privileged, and I thank this community for allowing me to do that, for educating me, and for supporting me to do that. So what can we do? One, the first thing is to educate the people. We need to educate Americans, we need to educate the administration, and we need to educate the Congress. I believe that what we did this past Thursday and Friday has brought attention of the administration to the real problems that are happening in Vietnam. That's why Condoleezza Rice stood up yesterday and said, we have to look at this, this is unacceptable. That's important. So now we have the ear of the Secretary of State with respect to this. Secondly, taking my own colleagues in. Initially, they weren't going to go to Vietnam, and I suggested, why don't we were doing a trip, we went to Guam, Japan, South Korea, other places where we have military presence, we have our own troops. I said, it's important to check and see what's going on with Vietnam. Bringing them in. Now my colleagues, the three that went in, knew nothing about the problems of human rights with respect to Vietnam. They have now been educated because they have seen it themselves. Now I must go to the Congress, and I must educate even a wider amount of Congress people to help us work on this issue. And how do we do that? Many years ago, I started a program called Adopt a Prisoner of Conscience, because I believe that if every congressperson is tied to a person, a political prisoner that's in jail in Vietnam, they will have a deeper connection and will see firsthand what happens and the injustices. For example, my colleagues could not believe that Father Lee had no representation at his trial, no attorney allowed at his trial. I mean, this is just something so foreign to us as Americans. Secondly, about every 18 months or 24 months in that time frame, in the Human Rights Caucus, we hold a hearing on Vietnam and what is happening. We've done it on the press. We've done it on religious freedom. We pick a topic and then we educate and we bring in speakers, we bring in dissidents, etc., and we speak to what is happening in Vietnam. And lastly, with my colleagues, a handful of them, we send out information to our colleagues, our other colleagues, so that they understand better what is happening in Vietnam. Is it a difficult task to do? Yes. The pressures are enormous to continue the economic benefits. You know, I mean, some would say, well, what does somebody in Iowa have to gain? If someone in Iowa can sell corn to Vietnam, then that congressperson is more likely to support what is going on in Vietnam because the human rights aspect doesn't affect his people in Iowa, right? They believe it doesn't affect them. But it affects all of us. As citizens of the world, when someone is denied religious freedom, it's like denying it to ourselves. And this is why we need to continue to educate them and keep fighting for it. So there are many things. What can this community do? Continue to support those in the Congress. Continue to go to Congress. You have made a big impact in the last few years as we have seen the Vietnamese community go to the Congress and lobby on the week that they go to lobby now. It makes a big difference. A big difference. First of all, it makes a difference for them to see somebody who doesn't look like them. Even this is a big difference for us in the Congress. And secondly, to see articulate positions put forward. It's important for my colleagues to see that. It makes it easier for me to go and try to win their vote when we try to pass things like the land reform resolution or put Vietnam on the list of particular concern with respect to religious freedoms, for example. This helps us to do our work.
Để cho chúng tôi xin tóm tắt lại cái lời nói của bà thì nó cũng khá là quan trọng cái lời trả lời của bà. Đó là bà nói là ở trong Quốc hội Hoa Kỳ cũng như là toàn xứ Hoa Kỳ thì họ có rất là nhiều cái vấn đề, rất là nhiều cái issue mà Quốc hội phải chú trọng tới. Chính vì vậy mà mỗi một cái vấn đề chúng ta cần có những người mà mang cái ánh sáng vào cái vấn đề đó. Và bà rất là hạnh diện là có được cái cơ hội để mà mang cái ánh sáng vào những cái vấn đề đang diễn ra tại Việt Nam. Thì cái phương pháp mà chúng ta có thể làm được là như thế này, là trước nhất là chúng ta phải làm sao chúng ta nâng cao cái sự hiểu biết của dân chúng Hoa Kỳ, toàn thể dân chúng Hoa Kỳ về cái tình trạng tại Việt Nam. Cái thứ hai là chúng ta phải làm sao để mà cho cái hành pháp, tức là cái administration của chính phủ Hoa Kỳ họ thấy được cái thực trạng tại Việt Nam và những gì mà đã xảy ra hồi tuần rồi, như quý vị đã thấy cái video đó thì đã chứng tỏ, đã coi như là với hành pháp của chính phủ Hoa Kỳ đã thấy được rồi. Đó là chính vì vậy mà ngày hôm qua bà ngoại trưởng Condoleezza Rice đã có lên tiếng là những gì đang xảy ra ở Việt Nam là một cái vấn đề. Và cái thứ ba là làm sao để mà cho tất cả những người trong Quốc hội Hoa Kỳ hiểu được cái thực trạng tại Việt Nam. Bà có chia sẻ một chút, đó là khi mà trong cái chuyến đi có 4 người dân biểu thì là cả 3 người khác trong cái phái đoàn đó đều không biết gì về Việt Nam hết, và là họ đều có một cái lối nhìn là coi như mọi chuyện ở Việt Nam đều tốt đẹp. và cho đến khi mà họ tới và họ thấy được cái cảnh mà đang xảy ra đối trước mặt bà như vậy thì là họ đã hiểu được vấn đề. Thành ra bà nói khi mình trở về trong quốc hội có tới 535 người, thượng nghị sĩ và hạ nghị sĩ, thì chính vì vậy mà khi mà chúng ta phải làm sao mà cho tất cả những người đó biết được cái thực trạng ở tại Việt Nam. Bà cũng giải thích thêm một chút về cái sự khó khăn của chúng ta trong cái công cuộc này. Đó là khi mà chúng ta cái vấn đề mà về kinh tế nó rất là quan trọng, là tại vì ví dụ như một người ở Iowa, một người nông dân ở Iowa, họ bán được những cái nông nghiệp qua Việt Nam, thì cái người dân biểu mà họ đại diện cái tiểu bang Iowa đó, họ sẽ không có chú trọng nhiều lắm về cái vấn đề dân chủ và nhân quyền ở tại Việt Nam, thì nó không liên quan tới những người mà họ đại diện. Nhưng mà bà nói cái mà chúng ta phải đánh thức cái tâm của những người này, đó là chúng ta là một cái xứ Hoa Kỳ này luôn luôn đứng lên cho vấn đề tự do tôn giáo, tự do tín ngưỡng và tự do trên toàn thế giới. Thì khi mà những người chẳng hạn như bên Việt Nam bị đàn áp về tôn giáo như vậy thì nó cũng xúc phạm đến chúng ta. Thì bà nói là cộng đồng Việt Nam, bà nói cộng đồng Việt Nam đã có rất là nhiều cái sự tiến bộ trong những năm qua, đã đi tới Quốc hội và nâng cao sự hiểu biết của Quốc hội về vấn đề Việt Nam, và bà khuyến khích cộng đồng Việt Nam chúng ta tiếp tục làm nhiều hơn nữa. Tại vì những cái việc làm của chúng ta nó có cái hiệu quả và nó nâng cao được sự hiểu biết của Quốc hội Hoa Kỳ. Dạ.
Tôi có thể hỏi câu kế tiếp với câu hỏi.
Dạ, xin mời.
Xin phép quý vị. Trong các mùa tranh cử, những người ứng cử viên đến cái cộng đồng Việt Nam đều hứa hẹn rất là nhiều, và sau khi đắc cử thì họ quên những cái gì họ đã hứa, và có thể họ bị từ áp lực từ phía chính quyền là thôi bây giờ có bàn giao ở Việt Nam, có làm ở Việt Nam, vì thế cho nên thôi bây giờ bỏ cái chuyện nó qua đi, nói theo kiểu như là make a deal. Vì thế cho nên ngày giờ này chúng tôi nhìn thấy bà Sanchez rất là cố gắng để giúp đỡ những cái khó khăn của người Việt Nam ở trong nước cũng như cộng đồng Việt Nam ở hải ngoại. Thì cái câu hỏi của chúng tôi là bà có tiếp tục thực hiện cái vấn đề bà đang làm hiện nay đến cuối cùng hay là không, và nếu có một cái áp lực nào hay là một cái nhóm nào trong chính quyền Hoa Kỳ yêu cầu bà bỏ qua cái chuyện này thì bà có nhận hay là không? Nói một cách khác đi, bà có tiếp tục những cái gì bà đã làm hay không?
Well, first of all, this is an issue. This is not an issue. This is about life. This is something you either feel or you don't. And as somebody who comes from an oppressed group also, it's important for me to stand up for self-determination. This is about self-determination. People should be able to express themselves. They should be able to choose their religious affiliation or worship God in the way they wish to. They should be able to assemble and organize with people in order to get things done. Those for me are very basic things. So I'll continue to work on them, and I do, regardless of whether it's Vietnam or some other country. Of course, I'll continue to work on it. You know, the election's already over. You know, some people, opponents and others, accuse me always, you just do this at election. This is not true. The election is very far away. You know, so we're going to continue to work on it, and we just will. With your help, we'll continue to work on it.
We love you.
Let me also say that we have a really good ambassador, I think, who really respects this issue of human rights and has been working. He's very frustrated, to tell you the truth. Frustrated that he has seen these things beginning to happen since November, and he has not had a vehicle, he's not had an opportunity, he hasn't been able to wake up the world as to what is happening. The fact, again, that the secretaries of our state yesterday mentioned Vietnam at all is a big deal. This is a big deal. Before I left, he gave me his op-ed, in which he begins by talking about the economic changes that are occurring in Vietnam. No one can deny them, and we're not. And, you know, we have to praise that economic changes and positive economic changes are happening in Vietnam. Who's making the money? I don't know. But we hope that the standard of living is increasing, especially for those of our loved ones who are there. But he begins by that, but he says, and I would like to give this to you if you want to print it, etc. He said, it is in Vietnam's own developmental and national security interests to ensure that its citizens also have world-class rights and freedoms. Vietnam must move to give its citizens greater space to express ideas, to organize themselves to address issues of concern, and to participate in the pursuit of real accountability, including, ultimately, the right to select their own leaders and representatives. So he says that in the first paragraph is about the economic future of Vietnam. The second, I just read to you. The rest of it is about how Vietnam is denying its citizens in each of those areas of rights. So I think that we have an ambassador that is trying to tell the world the story of what is happening. And we can get some copies, and if you would like to print it, I would hope that you would, because I think it's an important way for us to show that there are people who are working on this all of the time, not just at election time.
Để cho chúng tôi được xin tóm tắt lại đó là bà nói là cái vấn đề này nó không là cái vấn đề mà tôi bị của cuộc sống của người dân. Thành ra cái vấn đề là bà sẽ luôn luôn tranh đấu cho cái chuyện đó, không có phải là cái lúc tranh cử hay lúc không tranh cử. Cái vấn đề này mình sẽ phải tranh đấu cho cái chừng nào mình đạt được cái kết quả mà thôi. Cái thứ hai thì các bạn nói đó là ông đại tướng Nguoi Viet đã làm một công việc rất là tốt, nhưng mà ông rất là bị bức xúc là trong cái thời gian vừa qua, kể từ hồi tháng 11 tới bây giờ, khi mà thấy những cái chuyện lạ hạt xảy ra, ông đã không có những cơ hội để mà mang cái ánh sáng vào cái vấn đề này, tại vì nhiều cái ràng buộc trong công việc. Nhưng mà ông rất là cảm kích khi thấy có bà tới và đã cùng với ông để mà mang cái ánh sáng vào những cái gì đang xảy ra tại Việt Nam. Và bà cũng nhấn mạnh rằng cái lời nói của bà Ngoại trưởng Hoa Kỳ Nguoi Viet khi mà ngày hôm qua bà đích thân bằng điêu tí của Việt Nam, cái từ mà bà đã kêu là xứ Việt Nam đang có cái vấn đề đó là một cái sự rất là lớn. Thì từ trước đến nay mà Ngoại trưởng Nguoi Viet không có nói gì tới vấn đề Việt Nam đó, mà ngày hôm qua bà đã nêu lên cái đó, hay là bà muốn nhấn mạnh cái chuyện đó là cái vấn đề rất là quan trọng mà chúng ta đã thấy là có một cái sự thay đổi trong cái thái độ của chính phủ Hoa Kỳ đối với Việt Nam. Và bà cũng có chắc tất cả quý vị cũng đã có đọc cái bài này rồi, chúng tôi không nói nhiều thêm, nhưng mà chúng tôi xin được nhấn mạnh cái chữ là ông Nguoi Viet có nói về chính phủ Việt Nam là khi mà họ tiến bộ về kinh tế, nhưng mà thật sự mà muốn được hết tất cả những cái tiến bộ về kinh tế thì họ phải cải tổ cho người dân có cái tiếng nói, cũng như là phải có trách nhiệm với người dân. Thành ra chúng tôi xin quý vị nếu có câu hỏi gì khác nữa không?
Right.
Dạ chú này và một câu hỏi cuối cùng nữa thôi nha.
I would like to say that I respect your work to Vietnam. And I hope that you continue to have strength and energy to work to bring democracy to Vietnam. Thank you.
Okay.
Và một câu hỏi cuối cùng. One last question.
I just want to know, when you were there, were you surprised at what you saw at all, or were you surprised, or was it you're like, this is what I was talking
No, it's you know, before I left, I was having my nails done with my nail lady, Vietnamese. And I said, shh, don't tell anybody. I'm leaving tomorrow for Vietnam. And she started to cry because she told me her husband had been in jail for 9 years. He's here now, but he had been jailed by the communists for 9 years. And she just was so shaken, just crying, and she just says, it's just so terrible, you just don't understand how terrible it is to live with that. So you hear it all the time. You've experienced it, many of you. But to go there, these women had committed no crime. They were just coming to tea. The ambassador had already told the Vietnamese government he was doing this. It was not a secret meeting. It was nothing of this time. And to see how they descended on these women, how they pulled them apart, how they pushed them around, how they threatened them. And these women, it's incredible. I was scared. I was scared, and I had my military people there with me, and I was scared. So you can imagine how scared these women, and you see her in here, in this, and she looks so strong, but she had to have been incredibly scared. And I don't know what has happened to her. This is my fear, always, because I get to go, and I get to point at them and tell them they're back, and I come back to America, where I go on with my life. But these people have to live with it every day. So yeah, I didn't anticipate that it would be like that. Not at all. And yet it was. So it is a surprise that they would be so blatant. And so, what are they afraid of? What are they afraid of? That they would do that type of thing. Thank you so much, everybody.
Chúng tôi có những cái CD